Hi, I'm your host, Anand J. Sukadia, and this is the Limitless One podcast. Join me on this journey as I interview the most inspirational souls who are tapping into their limitless blueprint on a mental, physical, and spiritual level to thrive in uncertain times. If you feel you are so much more than just this body, just this life, and want to tap into your limitless potential, you're in the right place. Here we go, Starseeds. Welcome to the podcast, Joe Legolvan. How you doing, brother?
Good, brother. Happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm so glad you can make the time to come on today. Really appreciate that. We met through a mutual friend of ours, Brett Fallow, who was on my podcast several months ago talking about Bitcoin and mining and stuff. And he said that I got to interview you because you have an amazing story on your transformation in life, your spiritual journey, and also your financial success, along with how you help young people actually become more of a better version of themselves. So that is such a beautiful story, and I want to hear all about it. Joe, what does living a limitless life mean to you?
Man, first of all, happy to be here. And what a great question. To me, we were born into these bodies with limitations, into this world with limitations, just physically, we're limited to a single body here from our initial jump, being here. And I think it is amazing that we can break through those limitations in so many ways. We have so many ways to do that. And to me, it's about hitting all areas, the personal, the financial, the material, the spiritual, and trying to break through all those limitations. And ultimately, to me, that means becoming the best version of yourself. And that's a unique thing. That's a individual thing, because we all have ideas of what we want in this life or what our purpose is. And maybe our purpose is to go off and do something in the material world, save the whales or whatever that is. And that's all great. But at the end of the day, I truly believe our own purpose is to become the best version of ourselves, whatever that looks like to you. And as long as we are striving for that within our own psyche, within our own conscience, and we're trying to live a consciously congruent life where we are aligned with that, I believe we are on our purpose and we're going to be doing what we're here to do.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I think that the deeper that we go internally and find that alignment, find that authenticity within, that deepness that we go, then we can then affect the outside world in a more profound way. But when we're listening to outside voices or outside expectations of who we should be, it takes us away from our true power, which is really the ability to create anything. We're limitless potential and we're limitless beings, and we can have the ability to do all of that. But yeah, it has to come from that, from that higher self, which we all have. It's just creating the Wi-Fi connection a little bit stronger, with that. And we're going to learn about how you're able to do that in your life, and maybe how we can teach others on how to do the same. So yeah, Joe, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here?
Yeah. When I was younger, I kind of went through a spiritually transformational experience, I guess you could say, where I really wanted to look deeper into the meaning of things. And I'd been kind of living a one-dimensional life, if you will, very just kind of materialistic in my own thinking, not really branching out at all. And I went through some painful experiences. I went through some things that taught me a lot of lessons. And now I'm trying to basically integrate both the spiritual and the material. And I would say, there's multiple things that I've gone through. It's kind of hard to touch on maybe just one. So I guess when I was younger, one of the big things that helped me in that journey was actually going through a psychedelic experience. And if anybody's had a psychedelic experience when you're not really ready for it, that can be pretty profound, because it can actually push you towards your soul's purpose, but it's not exactly the most pleasant way to do it. It can open up a lot of things that you may not be ready for. And at that point, I had an experience on mushrooms where I basically saw my life. I saw the decisions I was making. I saw the people I was affecting in that experience. And it really made me think deeper on what is my effect on other people. And so that was a huge catalyst. And from there, I went from a very kind of, like I said, one dimensional life to really seeking spiritually. And I studied basically everything. I studied from Hinduism to Buddhism, and I spent several years connecting with the ISKCON temple here in Denver, which is the Hare Krishna society and the Hindus out there. And I met a lot of really cool mentors through that, learned about meditation, learned about Vedanta and the Vedantic teachings and such. And spending so much time with that, I really, I would say just doubled down into spirituality. But I got to a point, and this is what I think is interesting, is where when you really get super deep into that spiritual life, you kind of almost reject the material life in a big way. And that was, my existence. I was just meditating several hours a day. I was spending a lot of time at the temple, and I wasn't really experiencing a lot in my physical body. I was just kind of leaving that whole part out. And there was a point when I basically realized that I wanted to experience the material and the spiritual together. And it reminds me of the story of kind of like Siddhartha, the story of the Buddha, where he went from the life of a prince out to an ascetic, where he rejected everything. And then, of course, he found the middle path. Now, for me, that middle path is integrating all levels together, right? Integrating the physical with the spiritual, and enjoying our physical body, enjoying being here, enjoying creating businesses, creating money, creating relationships. And so at this point in my life, it's just kind of the integration of all these different levels. And again, coming back to your original question, there is, what is our living a limitless life? And that to me is trying to become the best version of myself on all of these different levels, within my own conscience, within my own unique purpose and destiny.
That's so beautiful. And yeah, thank you for giving us that, kind of the 30,000 foot view. I want to really dig deep into that and find out, okay, so let's just rewind a little bit. So the mushroom experience that you had, did you go into it? So how old were you, and what was your intention when you went into was it a ceremony, or was it for recreational use?
It was a recreational experience, which I think at that point in my life, that's all I was really into. And I was about 20 when that happened. I'm 38 now. Um, and that was, yeah, it was just one of those things where I'm hanging out with friends, I'm going to do it. And yeah, it was definitely life altering to say the least. And so, with hallucinogenics, I get that they are getting a lot more recognition nowadays, and I think they definitely have their place. But for me to look at, when people are using it in more of a fun way or more of a party way, to me, it's almost unfathomable, because to me, it was so traumatic that, and it was so life altering, that I think really having respect for these things is very important. Making sure you have an intention with them, because it's kind of a rough ride if you don't sometimes, if you're not able to process it and able to utilize it in a positive way. And luckily, I did have the spiritual foundation around me, to start seeking, that did help me process it in a positive way. But I think if people are lacking any exposure to that, it can be a little bit throw you off kilter, without that knowledge there.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for sharing that and being honest about it. I think intention is such a big part of the psychedelic experience. And,
Mm.
when people go into those waters, it can get really deep. So just to be really aware of what your intention is, and to do it in a really, like a safe setting, or like a ceremonial setting. You were very lucky to have accidental enlightenment, but, I really believe that everything happens for a reason. And this was the catalyst for your journey. For me, when I did ayahuasca for the first time, so I really didn't get into psychedelics much when I
Mhm.
was younger. Actually, I never had anything other than a couple times marijuana, but it didn't really do anything for me at the time. And then when I
Mm.
was 34 years old, I was seeking out ayahuasca. I ended up getting invited to a ceremony in in New York City, actually, at a really small 2 bedroom apartment. It was like it was a legit shaman, but it was still like a really strange setting because you
Mm.
could hear sirens and everything outside. And this was kind of before people were doing ayahuasca like really mainstream, so I didn't know if the cops were going to burst in or whatever. But
Yeah.
anyways, I it was like not the ideal setting. I would always suggest people go to a really safe ceremonial setting where where it's really appreciated and loved and respected. But I also had that kind of really life altering experience where it changed my life for the better. But not
Mm.
everybody gets to experience something like that when they're not doing it in the right setting. So that's the only reason why I
Yeah.
preface that.
Yeah.
But yeah, what were some of the things that kind of like destroyed your ego and that you kind of
Mm.
like you're like, okay, I can't go back to the way that I was living. And you were such a young kid, so we all do dumb things at in their
Yeah.
early 20s, but you were able to find this out at a very young age, which I applaud you for.
Yeah, no doubt. The big thing I think around that was seeing how much our mind impacts everything we experience, right? Like, so what we experience in life, it, I was just talking about this the other day on my Instagram. It's not what we are seeing in life, but where we're seeing life, right? So you can have the most ridiculous life externally. Like you look at somebody like Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, those type of people, Elvis Presley. Externally, their lives were phenomenal. They had fame, they had fortune, they had people loving them, tons of love. And how many people complain because they don't have enough love, right? Nobody loves me. I'm alone or whatever. Well, look at those people. They had literally millions of people who would do anything for them, and yet they were miserable. And it was because even though they were viewing a beautiful life, they were viewing it from a negative space. And for us to actually have a great life, it's where we're viewing it from is to align with our own higher self, align with a deeper purpose, align with the truth. And then from there, we can view whatever life we're experiencing from a better place. And so that was really helpful to me to see that what I'm experiencing in life is so determined on where I'm experiencing life from. And one of the things I really studied deeply was cognitive behavioral therapy. And if anybody's ever heard of that, that's a psychological therapy that basically says our cognitions are creating our emotions. So, for example, if you're having a negative thought, you're going to emotionally feel negative, right? Like if you're worried about the future, you think something negative is going to happen in the future, you're going to feel negative. And so the whole basis of that structure of thinking is based on what are you thinking right now? How are you going to experience life? And for me, when I started getting a spiritual perspective, seeing things from a higher perspective, that changed my entire emotional state. And what do I mean by that? If we are viewing our lives from a purely materialistic standpoint, like I'm just a temporary body, I'm a temporary person that's going to die someday, and everybody I love is going to die, and everything I create is going to be destroyed. If we're viewing it from that perspective, we're going to be very depressed, right? But if we view it from the reality of us being eternal, of energy never being created nor destroyed, we're just going through a transformational experience here because energy is never created or destroyed, just transformed. That will change my whole experience. That will change my whole perspective. So, with that hallucinogenic experience, I think it really exposed me to eternity and what it is like to live in a material world, live in a temporary body, but from a place of eternity.
Yeah, so powerful. Wow. I think it's, yeah, the quality of the mind perceives reality the way that it wants to perceive it, right? So if it's
Mm.
you're looking at a negative things or you're looking from a positive perspective, but yeah, when you do psychedelics or you do go into deep meditations and you see that eternity is everything, it's not just this 3D reality. It kind of
Mm.
opens up the blinders and allows you to see, oh, okay, this is just a small little life experience that we're going through, and what do we want to create while we're here and having some fun, but also having a lot of heart and spirit behind the actions that we do, and that there are karmic consequences for going in a path that doesn't really serve us or others versus going on a higher purpose and really achieving our dreams and our life by helping and uplifting other people.
Very true. And that can't be understated there because that was probably the biggest lesson out of it all was how I was impacting other people. at that time. And I was not living a very consciously congruent life. I was living very out of that, where I wasn't thinking about others. And I do believe, like, when you're exposed to something like this, you sense that we all know that, scientifically it's starting to prove that we're all connected, right? Everything is connected. We're connected with other people. But when you have a hallucinogenic experience like that, you feel that. You actually experience that. And if you're not ready for that, if you're not in the mindset where you're not prepared to experience the ramifications of your actions that hurt other people, it's going to be very intense. It's going to be very painful. And that was my experience, because I was not living thinking about other people, how they are connected to me, in a deep way. And what's interesting is the idea of morality comes from our identity. And the thinking is, once we know who we are, we know that we are connected to everybody, we know that we are one, then a lot of morality comes in, because it's based on, we're just trying not to hurt ourselves at the end of the day. It's not that I'm trying to be a good person and trying to, help everybody because it's the right thing to do. It's just, they are me. I'm literally helping myself. And that comes from being exposed to who you truly are. And that's why I think some of the most morally aligned people in this world are people who have seen the truth. And so they're not being good based on, oh, maybe I'll get to heaven someday, or maybe, some deity in the sky will smile on me if I'm good. They're being good because they literally know that they are other people at the end of the day. We are not just our brother's keeper. We literally are our brother.
Yeah, the way I try to look at things or people is everybody is a mirror, and
Mm,
whatever triggers us about them is usually what triggers us about our own selves. And the other thing is to look at other people as the childhood version of themselves. What, if they were a plant, if they didn't receive certain minerals or certain water or love or whatever it was, or sunshine, maybe that's how they turned out, but it's not because they want to be that
mm,
way. It's because they were lacked in something. And then until they wake up, then they can
yeah,
start having more of an awareness. And same thing with myself. Like, I have to constantly catch myself if I'm going down a path of like judging somebody or looking at somebody in a
mm,
certain way. I have to realize that that's not good for me. It's not good for them. It's not going to uplift both of us, right? So it's kind of like
right,
seeing that person and how can we love more? How can we lean into that care for them in order to kind of help them, even energetically, even if we don't have to have a conversation with that person, but just send them love or be loving towards them, because you don't want to pity anyone or you don't want to judge anyone, because
right.
what you project upon others also shines back at you.
So true. So true. And I think also how we experience ourselves too, like, on building on that thought too, is based on how we look at others too. Is this person a evil person, a horrible person, or is this person just going through a learning experience like myself, right? And if I can look at them from a less judgmental role, like you're saying, but also seeing that flower that maybe didn't get the sunshine, maybe didn't get the exposure that it needed, that's going to give you a lot more compassion in your viewing, and therefore a lot more compassion to ourselves, right? So one thing I've noticed, I run a physical therapy, massage therapy kind of wellness center, which sounds like that's what you do as well, Nand, which
Mhm.
is another way we align. But one thing I've noticed is some of the most depressed people I get have so many qualms with other people. They have so many negative things to say about their family, about their friends, about society, about life, and they're always complaining. And some politician, whatever side you're on, they hate them, and they will talk about how much they hate them and how evil they are and blah blah blah. Well, our subconscious mind does not know the difference between ourselves and another person. And subconscious, of course, just means the part of our mind that is not conscious. So when we are calling somebody else an asshole, our subconscious mind is saying, you're an asshole, and it's going to feel bad about itself. On the other end of the spectrum, some of the happiest people I meet are not necessarily people who have it all together, but they see other people with compassion. They're very compassionate towards others. They see them in a loving way, even though people aren't perfect. It's not like rose colored glasses where you're just assuming everybody's, Mother Teresa, but they see them as people on a mission, on learning, growing, trying to become their own best version of themselves in whatever capacity that they're at that level. And when you look at other people from that compassionate perspective, you end up looking at yourself with that compassionate perspective, and it takes away a lot of the guilt. And guilt is really the underlying root of a lot of our problems. It's the underlying root of anxiety. It's the underlying root of depression. It's the underlying root of us not overcoming our limitations, because with guilt, there comes fear. With fear becomes limitation, right? And in order for us to live a limitless life, we've got to break through those limitations. And we all know fear is one of the things that holds us back, but not people don't look at the deeper root, which is truly the guilt, which comes from our own judgments on other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, if you dissect all of that stuff, fear, it just comes down to the absence of love, right? It's
Mm,
like the absence of shining light in certain areas. So when we hold things in a dark place, that guilt or whatever, that shame or whatever it is, it's going to kind of like just fester there. And it's like this thing that needs to just detox out of the body. Once you detox it out, whether you have hatred for somebody and then you end up forgiving them, oh my
mm.
goodness, so many beautiful things happen. And I know during your ayahuasca, or sorry, your mushroom experience, you had an epiphany where you wanted to write a letter to all of your ex-girlfriends. And it's a very
Yeah,
similar thing to happen to me. But can you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to do that?
yeah, yeah. And that was I think that was probably the biggest part that I saw, was the people I affected in the deepest way were some of the intimate relationships I had had. And so I had felt a lot of their pain, because at that point, one of the things Brant always jokes about, he goes, "Oh, you were a total Chad at that part of your life," which I guess that's a term for, kind of a douchebag. But
Yeah.
so when I felt that, and I felt the depth of their pain through that mushroom experience, I went out on kind of a almost like an AA experience, where you try to rectify those things, where you try to tell them, "Hey, I was not coming from a place of enlightenment. I was not coming from a place of truth. I'm sorry, and please forgive me." Right, and that definitely, I think, lowered my karmic burden a little bit, because I think it just enabled me to kind of release my own guilt about my past in order to move on, right? In order to become the best version of myself. Because when we do have regrets in life, when we do mess up, which everybody does, nobody gets out of here without hurting people. It's sad, but it's just part of life. I think you're going to have to, in order to move on from that, in order to not recreate it, you got to start with self forgiveness, and that can be prompted by giving letters like that out and stuff. So for me, I was definitely finding people that I had hurt in the past, and just tried to reach out to them. It sounds like you did something similar there, Anand.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked about it on my podcast previously a few times, but I was definitely not a Chad like yourself, but I always looked at myself as a victim, or I always felt like I was being slighted. So I always came in with like a scarcity like mentality. So I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And when I perceived some girl that I was dating or whatever to slight me or to hurt me, I would send them really nasty emails
Mm,
after like the things didn't work out or whatever, and be like, oh, you're this and this and this, and like you're out of integrity. And I just would project all this like my own like lack onto them,
mm,
and it was festering inside me. But after I did ayahuasca that first time, I was able to see kind of any interaction I had, and not just with ex girlfriends, but it was any interaction at all that I had with other people that I either hurt them or they hurt me. And I was able to kind of like reverse roles and
mm,
see it from their perspective, but see it kind of from like an outsider's perspective, and just like see both people what they were feeling at the same time, and just kind of understand from a higher perspective. And
mm,
from there, like I ended up literally the same night that I came out of it at like 4 in the morning, I was just taking notes. The next day I just started writing emails out to all these people that I wasn't so loving to, or I wasn't so
mm.
kind to. And it just felt so good to just kind of put pen to paper, or to email whatever it was, and
Well, what
and
did?
release myself of that guilt. And a lot of them
Mm,
wrote back and were like, oh my goodness, wow, thank you so much, that meant a lot to me. I felt bad about the way things were ended,
mm,
or if it was my family members who I wasn't giving love to, when they were trying to shower me with love, I ended up kind of like making amends for that. So I really think that all this guilt that we have in these interactions with other people, like you said, like we're hurting ourselves when we put ourselves in these combative kind of adversarial roles with people, and it never feels good. Anytime you have an issue with someone, you pass them on the street, it's always very sticky, it's very ugly. And if we
Yeah.
can kind of remove that, that's when we live freely. And I think a lot of pain, physical pain goes away, emotional pain goes away when we're able to kind of express ourselves, because we don't want to hold that baggage onto ourselves. Even if somebody hurt us, why hold it on to our shoulders? Because we're carrying around all that weight our entire lives if we
Right.
continue to hold this anger towards anyone. And it's actually proven in cancer studies of, like, certain cancers, where they go in the body, they're related to certain emotional grievances people have. So it's
Mm,
very interesting, this
mm.
whole idea of holding on to this anger towards others.
Ooh, absolutely. And what a deep level of maturity to have there. And it's amazing because I know people that are, that in my practice or stuff like that, that are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, who haven't reached that level of maturity. They still are holding on to stuff. And it's so sad to see, right? But then you see younger people who may have some spiritual experience who are able to let those things go. And so our quality of life, I think, is dependent on that. Like, that is so huge
Mhm.
and super mature to kind of know that, hey, like, I'm projecting out onto these people, and I am, holding on to this inner turmoil because of it. And one thing I've always noticed, if you ever talk to somebody who's going through a breakup and they are going through a rough breakup, their ex is always a narcissist. Have you ever heard that? Everybody's ex is always a narcissist.
Psychopath or a narcissist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
psychopath slash narcissist, which is just, one of the ways we project. And maybe they are. Who knows, right? I don't know. But
Well, did they say like 1 or 2% of society is like has psychopathic tendencies, but
sure, sure, exactly.
it's
So who
apparently
knows?
it's
Maybe
everyone you talk to.
exactly. But everybody's ex is always a narcissist slash psychopath. But again, it's like that is not helping us out in any way, because if we are able, like you did, able to let go of this baggage, then we can really pursue what we're here for, right? We can pursue a limitless life, and we're held back so much by our own psyche, so much by our own mind, and a lot of that is just dwelt in just nonsense. It's just the baggage, like you said. It's negative thinking about others. It's about being a victim and those type of mentalities that do not help out anything in the creative process. So super super cool that you have that experience.
Yeah, definitely. And we talk about this on the podcast and we try to live it in our lives, but I'm telling you, like, to be totally honest, like, I still struggle with it on a daily basis. Like,
Sure.
for instance, if I have an interaction, or a client has a bad interaction with us, or they leave us a bad review, because something they did or whatever, like I get angry, and then, like, I have to really talk to myself and say, hey, listen, everybody's just trying to do the best that they can. But it does affect me when there's an interaction that doesn't go great. But
Hmm.
I have to constantly be mindful of it. It's not something that, like, oh, you learned a lesson once and then, okay, everything is like all,
Yeah.
roses.
Right.
It's a daily grind, and especially in this world where there's so much heated emotion right now. It's very important to constantly check ourselves, and then also have a way of releasing that stress that we have through its movement, or through meditation, or through so many different paths. And I'd love to hear about how you got into Eastern philosophy, Hinduism, because, yeah, I mean, you grew up in, was it in Denver you grew up?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I think it was just the knowledge that there was more. And of course, coming through that mushroom trip, it was kind of like, okay, I'm not getting the answers in my traditional Judeo Christian background, which I have nothing wrong with that. I'm open to that. I, of course, totally respect that as a philosophy. It helps a lot of people, whatever. But I was not getting all the in depth answers that I needed. And the thing about Vedanta, the ideas of Vedantic teaching, is it's not just it's actually a culmination of things. It's a culmination of people, it's a culmination of ideas. And I love the explanation of, like, not one person invented the fighter jet, right? Like, or the computer. You can't point to one person and say, okay, such and such invented the computer, because it was multiple minds coming together with a congruent mindset to create something in this world. And Vedanta is basically that, where if it's all these different mentalities, all these different teachings, that if they fell into this congruent, logical habit or area, then they were actually accepted and moved forward with. And so it wasn't just taking one guy's word for granted, it was actually tons and tons of teachers. And so I love the Vedas. I love the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Chamrita, all these different books that had so much knowledge in them, so much wisdom from everything from food to atoms to spirituality to who we are to who God is. And I definitely took a lot of that teachings to help me kind of get balanced here and try to figure out my place in the world. And so I just spent a lot of time in that. But I think the deepest thing they taught me was japa, which is the meditation with the beads. And that really helped me to kind of clear my mind, to get focused, because everybody talks about how, oh, it's so hard to just close your eyes and meditate because all the thoughts come in, and especially with the stimulation we have nowadays with phones and with the internet. But japa kind of helped me because it gave me something to focus on, gave me a mantra to focus on. And so that was extremely profound, because at that point, it wasn't just that I knew about these concepts intellectually. Like I'm like, oh, intellectually we're a soul, intellectually I'm eternal, blah, blah. It was like, no, I know this because I'm experiencing this on a daily basis. I'm experiencing the self beyond my physical self. I'm experiencing the soul that is eternal, that is having a temporary human experience, and really diving into that. And that is something that can be explained. And I think the intellect helps us experience that. But at the end of the day, the experience needs to be personal. It needs to be real for the person experiencing it. So I'm all for intellectual studies as long as they point to an experience that you can have individually, because ultimately, if we don't have that experience, we're still going to be taking somebody else's word for it. And that can't really change us, right? Because if we lose faith in that person, we lose faith in the entire belief system.
Yeah, 100%. And I grew up in the Vedanta, in Hindu religion, Eastern philosophy. And one of the things that resonated most with me is that it talked about seeking knowledge in many different forms. There's information that you can derive, truths, eternal truths in every religion. I think that what happens is, and including in Vedanta, there's certain spiritual teachers or whatever nowadays that try to influence people's minds by just telling them, okay, you need to follow this particular path. And I think all religions are guilty of that. But when you actually study the Vedanta just from the purest point of view and then interpret it in the way that you see how it relates to your life, I think the exploration in life is really encouraged, and to explore the mind, explore the body, explore the spirit on this 3D reality. I think it's a really great guidebook, and you could take what you need. What you don't have to take everything from it. But
Right.
that's one of the things that really resonated with me, and I see it, because obviously I grew up in this, so it was easy for me to kind of continue with it. But I see so many people, my friends, who are really into spirituality. They get into yoga or they get into meditation. They learn about the Vedas, and they incorporate it in their life. And there's nothing wrong with also believing in Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad. And
Right.
there's so many different ways to derive knowledge. And my personal belief is love is really the essence of it all. And if
Mm.
that is the ultimate religion, then yeah, like that really resonates with me on every level, because all teachings do that. But then they also there's man-made inputs that really kind of like tarnish the teachings of the truth of what
Yeah.
God is and what this life is all about. It's all about unity and love, and how do we create together a bit better future. But
Absolutely.
obviously the world that we live in, we're going through so many turbulent times. But this is all talked about in the Vedantas. With the yugas, and right now
Mm.
I believe we're in the Kali Yuga, where it's the
Hallelujah.
the age of destroying of what's not needed or not in Earth's and humanity's like future. So I think all this chaos, all this turmoil, it's happening so much quicker at a quicker pace. But it's actually necessary, because this means it's signaling kind of the end of this cycle and on to the next.
Right. And we need that destruction in order to grow. But yeah, Kali Yuga, I think they would say it's the age of coral and distraction, which that summarizes our world in such a great way. It's fighting and it's distractions. That's pretty much all you get in this in Kali Yuga. But that's also part of the cool part of the journey. And one of the references I always like to make when people get real down on the world and our what's going on in the world and our politics and all this stuff is if the video game was already figured out, if the game was, if you had all the cheat codes to a video game, what fun would it be to play? So we come into this world with all these problems, with all these issues, and that's part of the journey. That's part of our experience here. And so even the negative things that we go through, on a bigger sense, is all part of it. And so I love that you kind of mentioned that, in Kali Yuga, we're in a high level here of an age of quarrel and distraction. And so if we can overcome that personally by not falling into that, I think that's really when our character is tested. Our character is not tested when we're around people who share our character, right? It's tested when we're around people who are literally doing the complete opposite. Like, it's very easy to love other people who are loving us. It's very easy to be kind to people who are being kind to us. But there's that saying in the Dharma Pada, a Buddhist text, that's like, how wonderful is it to be selfless in a world where people are selfish? How wonderful is it to be giving, in a world where people are not? And so that's really where our character is tested. That's really where we can move on to higher levels of thinking, higher levels of being. So yeah, absolutely, brother.
Yeah, and touching on the point where you talked about we're eternal, we're limitless, we are God, we're just an
Mhm.
incarnation of God, and this illusion of separation that everybody is a different person. When you kind of like, just zoom out a little bit, you realize, okay, Earth right now, what we're going through, it's just a little experience. It's a tiny speck
Right,
in the reality of it all. But what if the people that are causing so much chaos and destruction and illusion, what if they are an aspect of God that is just here
right,
to kind of help us not fall for this illusional trap? So they're actually serving, they sacrificed their lives to become dark in this particular reality in order
right.
for to help us ascend to a higher evolution, a higher enlightenment. So, what you damns you back, right? But when you obviously understand the creation of it all, there is no separation from God, right? From
Yeah.
everything.
No, that's such a great point. And I think that you see people get real caught up in the dualistic thinking. And in reality, there are, people that do manifest negative things in this world. You can't be, rose colored glasses and just, not see. But in a deeper sense, like you said, we can see that basically it's for a bigger purpose. And when you zoom out a little bit, you realize everything is one anyway. And I always like to think about going back to the beginning. Say we are all one big mesh of God, right? We're in this state of unity, we're in the state of love, we're in the state of complete knowledge, and we're just chilling with God in this, soup of bliss or whatever, right? We would want to create something that would be the opposite of it for us to experience ourselves, right? Like, this world is so amazing because it's where the limitless experience limitation. It's where the non-dual experience duality. It's where the disconnect, or the connected experience disconnection. Right? We get to experience all these different states, which ultimately helps us grow, which ultimately is for our joy, for our experience at the end of the day. So even the negative, from a larger perspective, zooming way out, and I know it's hard for people to grasp that, especially if they're going through something negative. But if you zoom out far enough, you'll see that it does all serve a purpose in a higher level. So yeah, I love that you said that.
Yeah, in accordance with the Kybalion, they talk about the law of polarity, and the higher realms you could go to, you have to understand what the opposite is, because it's all encompassing and it's all one. It's a one moment always. So it's just understanding that there's always going to be the polarity and the duality in this world. It's just how it is. It has to be dark. It has to be light. But what
Right.
is to say what is light versus what is dark, right? There's always, you could always see a lighter version of something that was, something else, and you could always see a darker version of something dark. So it's like,
Mhm.
where does it become, like, if you look at a thermometer, right, it goes from cold to hot. What exactly is hot? Right? Is there
Mhm.
a point at which it becomes hot, or it's always going to move
Well,
along this scale.
And that's a great point too, because when we're coming back to our original point of becoming the best versions of ourselves, a lot of times we are doing that by comparing ourselves to other people, which is a total relative game. And so if imagine if we were on a different planet where everybody on that planet was enlightened to some degree, and everybody was manifesting their purpose. if we ourselves were in that world, we would start to level up around those people around us, and we'd think, well, this is just normal to manifest your purpose. It's normal to think very consciously congruent lives. Well, in this world, it's not normal. It's very unique to think like that, right? Because a lot of people are in the age of quarrel and distraction and in their own egos, on a very high level. And so to kind of pull yourself out of comparison and the relative game, to just really listen to your own conscience, to really listen to your own inner voice. It's very difficult to do, but I think that's when we are actually living our best selves. That's when we're actually at most peace. A lot of people struggle with depression, anxiety, those type of things nowadays. And to me, those are generally a symptom of not listening to your own voice, your own inner psyche, your own inner truth. Because a lot of times when we are not congruent with that, we are going to start to feel a certain type of way, that isn't actually feeling peaceful, isn't actually feeling loving. So I love that you're talking about how the ideas of hot and cold are all relative to what else we've experienced.
Yeah, I think it's important, and what I try to do is look at myself as the eye of the storm, where like in the
Mm,
very middle, the very like central point inside of there is actually the safest place to be, and
mm,
to be calm, cool, and collected inside that space.
mm,
Then you understand, okay, everything, all this chaos can happen around you, but it's never going to affect who you are, your character, your being, and what your purpose is in this world, no matter what, until the last day that you are breathing. You have this mission, right? And not to get dragged into something else that's outside of you. So
right.
it's really interesting times that we live in. It's just,
Yeah.
I think about it all the time, but we do have to kind of like understand the spiritual, which we obviously did a deep dive on today. But
Mhm.
then it's like, okay, how do you take that knowledge and then move it into creating this life and living in this reality? And can you tell us a little bit about when you decided? I know you went deep into the spiritual realm, and then you decided at one point, okay, I need to now start putting my mark on this world.
Absolutely. That is such a nuanced point, because I think when people get so into spirituality, they almost want to reject the world. And the analogy I always like to look at is, if we, the video game, to me, the video game is a perfect analogy of this world, because ultimately we're eternal beings having a temporary human experience. Just like in a video game, right? Like if you become a character in a game, you become that character for a little while, but ultimately you're safe and sound on the couch, right? If something happens to the character in the game, you're still okay. Like if the character dies in the game, you're still safe and sound on the couch. Similarly, we're eternal, we're connected to our source, we're connected to love, we're connected to God. And no matter what happens to this little individual human here, we're still safe and sound on the couch. But once we realize that, once we have that realization in the video game, right? Would you just go and sit in the corner and not experience the rest of the game? Right? No, you would go and play the game. Why do we play the game in the first place? Because it's fun, because it actually has value in the experience itself. So even though you aren't fully identified with the player in the game, you're still playing the game. You're not just rejecting the game and saying, "Oh, there is no game," or I don't want to play the game anymore because it's not real. No, you're going to play at your highest level, because that's why we're here in the first place. And so when I came to that conclusion personally, what happened to me was I was in such deep spirituality that I was not really experiencing the physical world, and I wasn't really becoming what I think I was called here to become, which I had a lot of desires. And to me, I felt like, oh, those desires are bad, right? Because they're not spiritual enough. I had the desire to get in incredible shape, have an incredible body. I had the desire to make a lot of money. I had the desire to build businesses. And from a spiritual perspective, those weren't good, right? Because those are materialistic. You shouldn't think like that, blah, blah, blah. And what I realized was, I felt, and it happened in one night, and I still remember the particular night. I was with a friend, and we had just got done. We spent 8 hours at the temple that day and just had a great day. And I was so blissed out. I was just in a space of just complete peace. And I remember I dropped him off at his house, and all of a sudden it hit me that I am not experiencing myself. I'm not experiencing this body. I'm here for a reason. I'm here for a purpose. I'm here in the physical world to do something. And once that hit me, it completely changed my life. And so what's good about it, and I'm so thankful I've had those spiritual experiences, is I've been able to take that mindset into my business career, into my real estate career, into my my personal career, my physical stuff, my bodybuilding, all that type of stuff that I've been into since, and actually integrate that thinking into it. And it's really helped me in my own way achieve my own personal success in those things, right? I'm able to manifest the body I've always wanted. I've been able to manifest, several million in real estate under my guidance and stuff like that. So it's been really, really crucial to my success. And I think, but it's also helped me have a detached look on it to make the wisest decision. Some of the people I really love is Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And they, of course, are known for being the best investors of our time and yada, yada. And when you read any of their books, their biggest thing is it doesn't take high intellect. It doesn't take, knowing all these different crazy things. The main thing they talk about is temperament, having a good temperament. And that having that temperament will enable us to make better decisions, because at the end of the day, what is investing but making good decisions? And if we're caught up in our ego, we're caught up in our own dramas, we're caught up in our own BS, some fight we had with somebody else, we're not going to make good decisions. But if our temperament is clear through spirituality, I believe we're going to make the most intelligent decisions to advance that player in the game. Even though we know it's just a player in the game, we're going to try to make that player advance to the highest level for the joy of the experience. And why not, right?
Yeah, definitely. So can you tell us a little bit about, the path that you decided to take? You have your own business in terms of having a wellness center, PT, massage. Then you're also in real estate. So how did you decide the different businesses or different income streams that you wanted to go into?
Yeah, for me, I've always been interested in freedom at the end of the day. And I love real estate because the cash flow, right? You can get the cash flow going in. One thing I did do, and I like to be diversified as well. I tend to put all my eggs in one basket. But one thing I did do was when interest rates were really low, and I could see that inflation was coming around the bend. We had printed more money than when we had in the last, I don't know, 40 years or some crazy thing like that. If you look at the statistics, and I'm probably wrong with that, but I know it was very significant. We printed like several $trillion in a matter of a year because of COVID. I knew inflation was coming, and we also had interest rates at the lowest possible rate. And so what I did was I went out and bought a crap ton of real estate. So I've got facility, we've got dozens of properties. We've got a Airbnb in Aruba, which is kind of a family thing. We can go out there and enjoy that, but we also have that cash flowing. What's amazing about taking out debt in a inflationary environment is not only is the dollar, when the dollar is actually denominated, when the dollar actually goes down in value, right? Like when it costs more to buy eggs, when it costs more to, go to the movies, all these different things that cost more nowadays, our debt also goes down. So the only way to align your interests with a government that is basically trying to inflate their way out of a debt, and every fiat currency has done it since the time of the Roman Empire. They basically did
And
the
everyone
exact,
has failed.
yeah, every single fiat currency has failed. So if you get your debt denominated in that currency, but it's in a hard asset, something that is going to appreciate, it has intrinsic value, then you're going to actually be able to kind of benefit from that. Now, I agree with the idea of it. I think we should probably go back to some sort of standard, maybe the gold standard, whatever. But I don't agree with it. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to play the game to my best ability. So as I have all this debt on all this real estate, the real estate keeps going up slowly. And of course, we'll have our ups and downs. But people are paying me rent to cover my debt obligation. And also, the debt is fixed. The debt is not going anywhere. They're locked in at these low, low rates. So, like, I have a friend who his mom bought a house down in Denver for $10,000 back in 1930. And in her mind, that was a lot of money. And her mortgage was $100 a month. Well, fast forward, $10,000 won't even get you a car, right? And so that just shows the power of inflation. It shows the power of getting locked in at a good rate, and buying something that is a hard asset that has utility. Utility is very overlooked when we're looking at value of an actual asset. And the value of an asset is based on how useful is it to people. And a house is one of the most useful things to people because it provides shelter, provides safety, it provides all these different things. So that's why personally I love real estate. I am currently looking at another property probably this year, maybe a fiveplex, eightplex, something in that world. And I buy out of state, I buy all over the place because here in Denver, the prices are very elevated. It's very hard to
Mm.
make cash flow on them. So I'm looking primarily in the southeast, in those type of areas as well. So that's kind of been my real estate journey and the logic behind it. Now that interest rates are higher, it's a little harder to make it work. So I am looking at other assets. I do buy, businesses in the forms of stocks and crypto and those type of things as well, especially now in the down markets. It's probably smarter to move some of my money into those assets because they are in more of a rough place right now.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that mindset behind it because yeah, you can create a shit ton of wealth, in the right opportunities and do it very quickly. And you're doing it in a very uh, actually intelligent but safe way because yeah, when the interest rates are super low, you're fixed. And now as inflation goes up, your cash flow is going to increase over time. So it's,
Right.
every time the economy has one of these crazy experiences where yeah, we're in almost hyperinflation, you're going to be protected in that. So it's
Yeah, to
really
some degree.
yeah.
Yeah, to some degree for sure. And one thing that I just had this realization recently. So I've had mentors in the real estate space. And one of the things you were talking about is like not comparing ourselves to others, right? And what helped was getting around people who are at such a higher level than me. Because when I was explaining these type of things to friends, they're like, oh, you're crazy. Why would you buy all these houses? Why would you buy all these properties? What are you doing? But their level of thinking was at a certain level where the mentors I had were at such a higher level. I remember one time I talked to one of my mentors. At the time, I had 7 properties, and I was freaking out. And I'm like, "Well, I just don't know if I can do this. It's too much." Blah blah blah. And he's like, he looked at me and he's like, "Dude, you got 7 properties. I got 70. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about." And he basically kind of called me out in that sense. But in his mind, it was such a small level to play at. And so when we do get around bigger thinkers, we're going to be able to raise that up. But one realization I've just had, and that actual same mentor, is his portfolio is about 14 million, I think. And what's crazy about that is it is self-catalyzing debt. He's got self-catalyzing debt on that portfolio. What does that mean? It means the tenants are paying off the debt of this $14 million portfolio he's got. So in short term, he's making some cash flow, right? He's making a couple grand a month or whatever. And of course, he's got a lot of management stuff. He's got to deal with tenants. He's got to deal with all these things. But fast forward 30 years to what his net worth is going to look like. And that's what's amazing is imagine that debt is paid off by the tenants over 30 years. He's got a $14 million portfolio today. So let's fast forward in 30 years and what's at a low level, let's say that portfolio's doubled. And that's a very low level of appreciation statistically with real estate. It most likely would be 2.5 to 3 times the value. Let's just say for numbers' sake, it doubles. Now his portfolio in 30 years is completely paid off, and it is cash flowing $500,000 a year, and it is worth $30 million. And basically, all he did was take out a bunch of debt, have a bunch of debts in place, and was able to smartly do that. Now, how many people in their 401k are going to build up a $30 million nest egg that gives them a $500,000 cash flow or more per month after 30 years? And with all the advances we're making in technology, with all the advances we're making in our health, I truly believe people are going to live a lot longer. One of my goals personally is to live to 116 years old. It sounds crazy. And again, it's people around me, they're not thinking at that level. So they tell me, why do you want to live that long? Well, you don't want to live that long in a shitty body, of course. But if you're living that long in a very healthy body, a very balanced body, and you feel good, why not live to a long time? And so if I'm thinking very short term, oh, in the next 2 years, I want to make $1 trillion or whatever, that's usually going to burn me. But if I'm thinking long term, past the 30-year mark, and thinking about when I am 60, when I am 70, when I am 80, 90, and looking at my net worth from that standpoint, the 30-year fixed rate debt is one of the smartest things you can do because it's subsidized by our own government. You don't get these type of loan terms in other places like you do in America. And so that
Mhm.
really changed my mindset to watch these guys build up these huge portfolios that were self-catalyzing debt. And the reason they're doing that is they're doing it for their kids, they're doing it for their future, they're doing it for everybody they love, and to have financial freedom. And that ultimately is my goal as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's it starts is with one property, and then once you start cash flowing that, it's another
Mhm.
one, then another one, and you're able to build it in a few years. A lot of people say, okay, try to buy one house every 1 year or every 2 years. And if you're
Right,
doing that over the course of long term, you're going to build up a 30 million, 60 million, $100 million portfolio, depending on,
right.
the different markets you're in. And unless you're a member of a Congress, you're not going to create that kind of wealth in the stock market.
Right. Yeah, unless you've got some insider knowledge there. Yeah. Hmm. But I do
Absolutely.
like the
Okay.
liquidity of the stock market, so I do invest in that long term. And again, I think about that. But yeah, the leverage piece in the real estate is what really sets it apart. If you are using leverage, like if you're going to buy places cash, you might as well just go into the stock market because your return is going to be, lower than what you get in the S&P 500. But so that is one thing. But I do try to keep the liquidity there, so I am investing in the stock market because who knows if I need that cash on hand, something comes up. I would like to have the access to it, because real estate is notoriously illiquid, which actually helps me out because there are times when I would have sold at the quote top,
Mhm.
or I would have, panic sold or done all these stupid things that I can do in liquid markets, like the Bitcoin and real and stocks, where you can literally click a button and get rid of millions of dollars of assets. You just can't do the same thing in real estate. So I like that. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me just cash flowing and not really worrying too much about the ups and downs.
Yeah, and diversification is key, like you mentioned. You want to be a part of everything. It just depends on when you enter that market. Like now, as the stock market is down and continue to decline. Same thing with Bitcoin. These are the times you want to start accumulating, rather than 2001, when everything is at its highest point ever. That's when everyone's FOMOing into the market. Like it's
Right.
very it's basic math, is basic cycles. But again, emotions get the best of us. And as you mentioned, Charlie Munger and Mr. Buffett, they hate Bitcoin, by the way. They say call it rat poison, but
Yeah.
they're incredibly smart at what they've done. It's a new kind of paradigm that they haven't really got into with the Bitcoin and stuff. But yeah,
Well,
diversification
exactly.
is the
And
best
what's
way
funny
to.
about Charlie Munger's, we keep losing each other, is, we're asking him about the future of money, and the guy's, he's probably not even buying green bananas at this point because he's at the point of his life where he is like ready to go. Like that guy has no F's to be given. I mean, he is so, he cracks me up. But yeah, I mean, he's not going to understand it, and I get it too. He's not going to want to completely deny the system that has been around since he's experienced that. So yeah, he is definitely not the guy to ask with that. But that's what's cool is I always try to learn from everybody regardless. Like I will learn what my coach actually, he spent 10 years in prison. He is a very flawed individual. You see it in his character, but he has also helped me so much in my own content and my own building my own fitness business, stuff like that. So I can learn from people who do have these different flaws and try to take the good and leave the bad. And that's a beautiful thing about kind of going back to our original point is not judging others, very judgmental, be able to learn the good from other people, one or two things they say, living in that mindset.
Absolutely. You can learn from every single person that you interact with. It could be a billionaire or it could be somebody on the street. There's
Right.
everybody has some knowledge, to share. And that's the one thing I love about you, is that now that you've kind of like worked your way up to accumulation of knowledge, implemented in your real life, have success on many levels, now you're starting to share it with other people. So can you tell us a little bit about how you work with some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a personal one-on-one coaching. It integrates with diet, fitness, routine, mindset, habits, and I specialize. Say that a lot of my clientele are younger men who are struggling with depression. They're struggling with a vision for their life. They're struggling with just they're just kind of floating, right? They're kind of overstimulated. They're dopamine killed. They don't know what they're here for. They don't really feel good about where they're at. They're out of shape. All these different things. What I'm able to do is we're able to work together on a one-on-one basis and formulate a life vision. We're able to actually sit down and say, here is let's talk about where do you want to go? What is in your heart to do? And then we actually work on removing the limitations for that life vision, right? And a lot of that requires discipline. A lot of it requires, consistency. And that's kind of the accountability piece that I'm there with as well. And I work, of course, with females as well, but the graphic that I've been working with can relate to lost in those states where you don't know why you're here, what is a good decision and a bad decision there, and say, hey, here's your goal, and the habits and rituals that will get you to that goal. And when you fall off, here's me to help you about your goal. It is a two-way street where when I'm able to coach somebody, they're simple, they're true, which, truth is always going to be the simplest thing, right? It's not hidden from us. It's not somewhere off in the mountain somewhere. Like, I think whoever the deity here put truth right in front of our face. He's not trying to hide it from us. We're not victims here where we have to, climb Everest to find the truth. It's right in front of our face. And he did that on purpose. And so the truth is simple, but when I'm reiterating those truths to these people, so it's a very nice, congruent relationship there. I've never been happier in my life and I'm doing this, there's money involved, but at the end of the day, I'm doing this because it is in my heart. It's just doing it on another level with people who aren't in jail, with people who do have more opportunities, with people who can actually create the life that they want. And that's what we do. We help them create the body they want, the life that they want, the mind that they want, the relationships from every single area, so they can become the best versions of themselves as well.
Yeah. So Joe, it's just amazing talking to you and seeing your vision for this life that you have, not only creating more happiness and fulfillment in your own life, but helping other people. I think that's really what it comes down to. And that's where I get most of my fulfillment, is when I make an impact on other people's lives. If it's a short conversation or if it's, working with somebody long term, it's always fulfilling to see the growth in other people. Because yeah, if you're only excelling on yourself and seeing everybody else, being left behind, it's not very fun. You want to be celebrating successes with everybody else. And I think one of the things you talked about earlier is like, the people you surround yourself with, is like, find people that are achieving the things that you want to achieve and learn from them. And even if you're like at the bottom of the rung there, you're looking down and there's people, underneath you in terms of where you are, where they want to be. So it's always like, this kind of like self-fulfilling, kind of just like this circle of knowledge where you're sharing with other people, you're learning from other people, and it's flowing in abundance, because yeah, this world is totally limitless.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. That's so true. And it is hard to get around people who are at a higher level. I think our egos don't like that. But again, this is where spirituality comes in, where when you have had an ego destruction and you realize that at the end of the day, love is all that matters, it's easier to put yourself around people who are at a much higher level than you, because you're not going to feel as bad. And again, I think that's why our success is a lot of times dependent on us being able to overcome that, us being able to have a spiritual perspective, because we are going to be willing to get around people. I'm meeting with a coach on Tuesday, and this guy is just, I mean, he's doing literally like 100x what I'm doing. And so when I first see that, I'm like, ugh, like it makes me feel bad, because I'm like, why do I suck so bad, right? But in reality, I've got to let that go. I'm going to move on. I'm going to learn as much as I can from him. And what's cool about that is that'll push me to a new level. Whereas if I had an ego and I was in this space of like, oh, well, screw him, I'm trying to look down on him, I would never be able to grow, right? And so that's that age-old saying, the meek shall inherit the earth. And that's what I truly believe it means, is the humble enough to learn from other people, to learn from people at a higher level than you. If you're humble enough to do that, you are going to end up inheriting the earth in a metaphoric sense.
Yeah, and also like going back to the original point that we're talking about, is everyone is a mirror. Is like that person that you're looking up to and thinking, oh, this person's so much better than me. He's the same as you. He's just showing you the path, that this is the way to get there. And especially if you're working with a coach, they're going to give you the steps in order for you to, because there's nothing new under the sun. They learned it from somewhere. It's very rare that somebody just all of a sudden wakes up and is successful without
Sure.
learning the steps it takes to get there. But yeah, just appreciating where you are in life. And I think that's really where it comes down to, is having the self love for yourself, knowing that you're capable of anything and that you can go in any direction that you want to. It's just being patient with yourself, and then also taking action and being in the right mindset, in the right feeling, in the right heart space. And once you start kind of putting all those things together, then you start seeing the magic unfold in your life. And I can see it in your life. Obviously, I feel it in my own life that like what I have now is just journaling about it. And I'm looking around like, my view and like the place that I live in and the people that I have in my life and all the things that I wanted 5 years ago. I was like, oh man, I just wish I could have this and this and this. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's here. Now, what is the next 5 years going to look like? And what is stopping me? It's only my limitation of my mind. And when I can start expanding that, then I can start expanding, the reality of what I can create. But your dreams and your visions are only as big as what you can essentially think of
Yeah.
and feel
Yeah.
that you're worthy of, right?
So cool. So cool. And I love that. And I think you saying that, I mean, that reminds me of myself to do the same thing, to sit back and just be grateful for where you've come from, because it does improve your faith when you really look at your life and go, God, I wanted this 5 years ago and I thought this was unfathomable. And now I'm here. Like, what else can I do? What else can I create? And when you have a little win like that and these little wins start compounding, you do start realizing how much power we actually have as creators here and how much our intention and our vision really matters for us.
Awesome, brother. So let me ask you a question. What is, now that we know like where you are currently and where you came from, what is your vision for life going forward?
So it's multifaceted. I mean, it's in every area. I mean, the real estate, I would like to basically 10x what I've got now. Net worth, same thing. Relationships, same thing. And my coaching business, same thing. I mean, everything I'm doing right now, I love, but I would like to do more of it. I would like to help more people. I've got, of course, my vision board on my phone, which is, it's got all of the different lists of specific things that I'm trying to create. But in my life, I would love to, one of the big things is help 1 million people in a deeply profound spiritual way. That is one of the things I truly believe in my heart, that I'm here for a purpose to do that and to help myself in the process, and there's nothing more consciously congruent we can do than heal ourselves and try to heal other people. I think that is the ultimate bliss of life. Everybody's looking for fulfillment. Everybody's looking for, a way to be happy in this world. And that's it. I mean, heal yourself and heal other people. If you do that, you are going to live the most badass life, regardless of your external circumstances. So for me, that's really where my head is at, trying to create that. And the big thing I do work with people is getting them that vision, because the way our minds work is we need something to do. It needs something to think about. And our minds are going to be working regardless, right? That's why when we sleep, we still dream, even though our mind is quote unquote turned off. And very few people get to the stage of just pure silence, unless you're, a Nisargadatta Maharaj or, these high elevated gurus. Rarely do we get to that place of silence. So what I realize is I need something for my mind to focus on, because if I don't, I'm going to start thinking about my fears. I'm going to start thinking about the negative things that could happen in my life and what could go wrong, what could take away all these different, and if I'm starting to think in that realm, guess what? I'm going to start feeling that. And guess what? I'm going to start feeling bad. Whereas if I'm thinking about what's next, what do I want? This was great. I'm grateful for it, but what can I create in the future? What more badass experiences can I have? What more people can I touch? Then I start to think on those things as opposed to going into a worry or lack state. So that's one of the reasons when I work with guys who are depressed or who are having anxiety and those type of things, we work on getting a detailed vision for their life in order for them to actually start to think in that way and start to think productively rather than thinking in a negative light. So that's super important for me. And it's one of the things that I truly believe in, is formulating that vision so then you can move forward in a positive direction.
Amazing, Joe. Thank you so much, man. This is a perfect way to conclude the conversation. We just scratched the surface, so we're gonna have to do this like multiple times, and maybe next time we do it with Brant, because I know
Yeah.
there's
Oh,
some
I love
magic
that.
going on there in the conversation we had last time. But yeah, I want to thank you so much for coming on, and I really believe that anyone listening to this podcast is going to be so inspired to see the journey of your life, and hopefully you can help them out if they reach out to you.
Absolutely, Anand. And I appreciate you and all the stuff you're doing. It's cool to meet people like yourself, because people like yourself are very rare in the world, and I'm definitely honored to be around you.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much. God bless.
You as well. Thank you, brother.